This is Tim Staten and Stating the Obvious, where we make sense of leadership principles and turn them into relatable everyday actions that could enhance or improve your leadership style. In the last 2 weeks, we talked about the topic of trust and trust in when it comes to the foundations of team building. And again, these are based on Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. So as we move on to the second topic, which is healthy conflict, it's important to know that this is built on the foundation of trust, because without the foundation of trust, people aren't able to be vulnerable enough to endure healthy conflict. You see, most people avoid conflict. I don't think a lot of people run into it and enjoy conflict, especially in the work environment. A lot of people want to get along. They want to have kumbaya and happy-go-lucky relationships. And unfortunately, when you're building a team, there are times for those moments, but really, we need to hold people accountable and get after things. So having healthy conflict in an organization when you're building teams is a good thing. So meetings are a great place where healthy conflict can happen. People can bring up new ideas that challenge the norm. There are people who are supposed to be meeting suspenses and deadlines, and this is where you hold them accountable for that. And there's different types of meetings when you have them. I wouldn't recommend you draw them all up into one meeting. So for the second principle that we're going to get into of healthy conflict, we're going to take a look at what it is and how you can apply that into team building. This is the part where I take a break from talking and making a couple plugs and ask a few things of you. First, for those of you who have checked out this podcast, I want to say thank you. This week, we actually got over our hurdle of what we were looking at, and we're close to 150 independent downloads, and last week we're at 100, just over 120. So thank you for your contributions, and thank you for sharing this podcast and getting it out there to other people. What I would like to ask, so again, if you were a recipient of this podcast in the show last week and you like it, share it with somebody else who you might think would like the show. And then our continued listeners, if you could share it with somebody else who you think might like this show as well. And what this does is it gets us visible on iTunes, so that way people who don't have the ability to actually see it or just kind of scrolling through, they'll be able to take a look at it. And it keeps us up on the current list on Podbean as well, for people who haven't already found us can take a look at it. Also, if you could rate us and like it, that would be great. If you leave a comment, I will make sure that I will, call you out by name on the next episode and say thank you for it. I haven't received a bad comment, but if I do, I will also thank you for your bad comment, because that helps me improve. So this week, I'm actually trying something new with the format based on some feedback I got from some close friends and relatives. So if it sounds a little different, I also would like to welcome your feedback on that and how you like the new flow of the show. So it's ironic that this topic for this week is healthy conflict, because in my current job, I had to induce some healthy conflict to bring about growth in some people that I work with. So for most people, I'm actually on vacation right now. So that means I'm able to step out of the workplace and be more at home, even though I got called back into work a couple times this week for some things that were probably unplanned. In order to help people grow, there has to be a healthy level of conflict in which people can, given the space to try new things and succeed or fail. And then if they fail, then, dig into that and find out what happened, what went right, what went wrong, and what are things that we can do to improve and move forward. The other things that we need to do with healthy conflict is, hold people accountable and ensure that they understand what they're being held accountable for. So for instance, I'll give you an example. So like this past week at work, somebody was supposed to set something up at a very specific time for a meeting to take place. Now, you would think that setting up a telephone for a teleconference to happen would be pretty natural. So if everybody knows that a teleconference is supposed to happen, obviously a telephone is required for this. And if you are in charge of scheduling this conference, you would make sure you have all your resources. So all the participants are attending, you have an agenda, you know what you're going to talk about, you have dial-in information if there's a code associated with it, people know the code, and everyone knows the time that everyone's supposed to dial in for this teleconference. What happens when the person who's supposed to set this up doesn't do it? You know, it sounds very simple, like, well, of course that needs to happen. But when you take a closer look at it and you go to find out, well, the person that was initially given the task didn't delegate that task down to somebody else who was actually supposed to action it, or when they did, they failed to follow up on that, then, you know, they didn't call that person out for being late. They just kind of let it go. Like it was okay, that was the norm, that it's okay not to show up to work on time. It's okay not to do the implied task that you're supposed to do. And that set a precedent that I wasn't okay with. So instead, I chose to go into work, call everybody in, and have a little conversation about how it's important to make sure that we do all the specified tasks, do all the implied tasks, and then we follow up when we're supposed to make sure it happens. And then when it doesn't go exactly as planned, find out why. But when we obviously know that somebody is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then we can't let that slide either. You have to challenge those people to rise to the occasion. And eventually you'll find out through the team building process that some people can't rise to the occasion, or they don't want to rise to the occasion to whatever the norms are and the expectations are of that team and of that group. And that's okay. And they can eventually, you know, move on and do better things and go somewhere else and be part of a different team. So that's just like one small snippet of what happened this past week in my own personal life. And I know it seems very, very minuscule. Oh, a guy didn't set up a phone on time and another guy let it slide. But that sets a slippery slope for setting mediocrity in your team and setting standards of not holding people accountable. And again, if we go back to trust, people trust that you're going to do the right thing. People trust that you're going to show up on time. And people trust that you're going to hold people accountable. And we'll get to the accountability piece later. But if we just let that be okay and just kind of laugh it off like, oh, yeah, you made a mistake, and we don't have that conflict there to help that person grow or those people grow, then that's going to be an issue because it sets an underlying tone of mediocrity in a team, and we just can't have that. The other thing that healthy conflict does is that it brings things to light that should be brought to light so that they can be addressed to improve the organization and move forward. So if you just let something go and something else happens and you just let that go, now you've set a pattern. You know, that's why I'm saying it's important to ensure that as people show up and are, you know, being challenged in their ideas, also make sure that you can also handle having your ideas challenged. Making sure that if you bring up an idea and someone goes, well, I don't think that's a really good idea, and here's my supporting reasons on why it's not a good idea. Well, then you as a leader need to take a step back and evaluate that as well. So they're not just challenging you and your position and your authority, where they're really saying, I see something different and I have a different idea and opinion on that, and your idea is probably not the best one. And that's okay. But you have to have that, again, that foundational trust that that's where it's coming from. Some people just want to shine and make themselves look smarter and better. And those people will eventually, you know, come to light and they'll move on and they'll do other things. When it comes to, you know, legitimately calling out ideas and making sure that people have a fresh way of taking a look at things and trying to really better the organization, those are the things that, you know, we really need to look at when we're looking at healthy conflict in a team. So what does that look like in reality? So we talked about the theory of what healthy conflict looks like. So how do we apply that to every day? Well, I think one way we can do that is during a meeting. I've had several meetings recently where we were doing these things called after action review. So an event would happen and then you would bring everybody collectively a part of the team who's a part of it, and you talk about what good, what went bad, what we can improve, just how to get better at that one event that just occurred. So part of it is some people come to the table and they're like, I have great ideas, but I'm not going to share it because, one, I'm afraid, which goes to the trust thing that we talked about last week. I'm afraid that if I bring up this idea and I challenge somebody in a position of authority, or maybe my immediate supervisor, maybe they didn't do something they were supposed to do, when I challenge them and I call them out in public, I'm going to make them look bad to their boss, and that might come back on me. When in reality, the situation should be, hey, an event that occurred, and I'm not happy with what something happened, and I think there's a better alternative outcome that could have happened if we'd done something different. So the second type of person that comes to the table is the type of person who's, I'm going to call it playing safe, for lack of a better word. They know that there's deeper issues and deeper conflict mechanisms that they can arise. However, they choose not to, only because they don't want to look like they're challenging the norm or bucking the system. And the only reason why they view that they are thinking that they're bucking the system or challenging the norm and may be ostracized for is because they don't have that trust built in there. So if we had that trust built in, like we talked about last week, they would feel more confident in bringing to the table new ideas and actually really, really challenging the system. But these people are going to play it safe because that's the easier thing to do. If I play it safe, now I look like I'm contributing to the team, I'm committed, but at the same time, I'm not overly committed, and I'm allowed to back off and say, hey, here's a little small snippet that's very superficial, I think we could improve, and everybody will jump on that idea and say, yeah, that's a good thing that we definitely, if we improve this for next time we do it, or if we take this idea and apply it to another one, of course things are going to be better. However, when you peel back the onion on it, they know deep down inside there's bigger issues that they could tackle and bring to the team, but they're going to play it safe. The third type of person who comes to the table is the person who's going to bring it all out and bring up those big ticket items that they know that if they bring it to the table, they talk about it, it's going to improve the overall organization. It's going to cause a lot of conflict. They're going to call people out by name saying, hey, I don't think you did what you were supposed to do. And if you would have done X, Y, and Z, then this event would never have happened. And in fact, it could have improved the overall enhancement of the team if you would have done what you were supposed to do. So some people think, calling people out is not a good idea. It's how you do it and the approach that you do it. But calling people out and asking them, hey, you were supposed to fulfill your roles and responsibilities on this team, and you failed to do so. And by doing that, you let the team down. That creates healthy conflict. You're bringing it up because sometimes they may not know it was part of their roles and responsibilities and what they were supposed to do. They may not have known that they let the team down. Maybe they thought that they completed that task to the best of their ability, and they didn't realize that they could have done more. And by talking about it, you flush out those ideas and those concepts of how they could have done better. And then they realize, okay, for the next time I can do that. It's hard sometimes, and that's why we're managers and we're leaders, to bring up and talk about the hard topics. Hard topics are what we do. So if you're that third person, this is what I'm going to challenge you to do. Be that third person. Be that person who comes to the team prepared to talk about the tough items, the ones that do hold people accountable, the ones that do call people out by name and challenge their assumptions and their ideas and cause them to grow, and you grow as a team because you're both working towards a better goal of how do I get better next time? How does the team get better next time? Sometimes you come up to the idea that, hey, maybe you're not the right fit for the team, and that's okay. I know you're going to feel bad about it, but the team will benefit if you're replaced by somebody else. It takes a lot more time to get to that point, but sometimes these healthy conflict ideas flush out what's best for the team. So that's what we're going after here, is what's best for the team. Conflict is good as long as it has a foundation of trust that it can go back onto. What everyone's bringing to the table is best for the team and not just best for the individual. So I want to thank you for listening to today's episode of Tim Stating the Obvious, where we talked about developing how healthy conflict is good when we build teams. I would like to ask if you could please subscribe to this podcast, share it, and then comment on it. And then also, if you do comment, please, ask a question so we can generate a discussion. So there's two places you can do this. You can do this on iTunes, the Google Play Store. Actually, there's more than two places. So there's iTunes, the Google Play Store, and on Podbean. All those are great places where you can leave a comment and engage. Also on our Facebook page, Tim Stating the Obvious, is another great place where you can check us out. I always post the most current either YouTube video or podcast on there, just to make sure that we really get the message out. So those are other good places. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode and come back for another one. I'm Tim Staten, stating the obvious.